Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session with reading of philosophy with Meenakshi. And today we are taking the Eon magazine, as all of you have requested me, and on the necessity of obedience. This is by about George Berkeley, who was again a great political philosopher, as we say. So let's try to understand what he was talking about. This is about obedience. So what exactly does he talk about? So George Berkeley is known for his doctrine. Doctrine means his principles, his theory, his thesis, you could say, of immaterialism. Now you have to understand this concept. Uh, Immaterialism is something which is opposite of materialism. So now, what is materialism? Materialism was a philosophical concept which talked about matter as being something important. So matter as in something which is composed of stuff. So something which can be seen, touched, felt. That is something which was real. And that is the concept of materialism. Also, objects of desire and things that you want to possess, you want to buy, you know, those were also concepts of materialism. So the focus was on things, was on material objects, which you could see and touch and feel, which you could possess, which you could buy. Whereas immaterialism becomes opposite of materialism and it focuses more on ideas, concepts, the idea that the physical is not important, but the ideas are more important than matter, than what we can see, or the human body, or the human beings. The ideas are more important, the thoughts are more important. That is immaterialism. So this guy, George Berkeley, was known for this concept of immaterialism. So obviously now we know something which is opposite to the solid things that we can see. Rather, we're talking about abstract things of ideas and feelings and lots many more things. Okay. So the counterintuitive view means the opposite view of materialism, that there is no material substance underlying ideas perceived by the substance. So here, perceived by the senses. So here we are saying that there is an opposite view, that there is actually no material substance which is under the ideas perceived by the senses. So here we are talking about something opposite to the senses, the things that we can feel, but we are not focusing on the things that we can touch and possess. Okay, so we tend to think of a horse-drawn coach as a thing, but Berkeley tells us that it is really a set of ideas. So here we are saying that a horse-drawn coach, meaning a horse cart, is actually a substance, it's a thing. But George Berkeley is saying that it is a set of ideas, and we have created that image, and so that thing exists. It is not that the thing exists and then we think about it. It's our thoughts that have created that thing. Okay, the sound of the coach in the street, the sight of it through the window, the feel of it as we get in it. So, in the horse carriage that you can see, the sound and the feeling as we get in is all a concept of ideas of our mind, is all a creation of our imagination, of our ideas. Okay, we regularly perceive these ideas going along with each other, but there's no material thing beyond the ideas that supports or holds them together. So that means that no material thing is there beyond the ideas. So just चीज को we can conceptualize, only that can exist. Anything which is in an idea form, only that can exist. Anything which cannot be formulated in an idea will not exist. That's what he's saying. So, but there's no material thing beyond the ideas that supports or holds them together. The ideas are all there is. So ideas में ही सब कुछ conceptualize होता है. Everything is conceptualized in ideas. And it's a hard view for present day reader to stomach. I mean, it's to stomach here means to stomach something means to digest, to accept. So it's a hard thing for people of today to accept. And it was hard on the stomachs of readers, even in Berkeley's days in the early 1700s. It's more than 300 years old idea he's talking about. And at that time also it was difficult for his readers to accept this. He acknowledged that it sounds very harsh to say we eat and drink ideas, but insists that nourishment is nothing more than various ideas of the senses. So he's saying that we think and drink ideas. I mean, because the food also is obviously an idea, but he's saying that nourishment is nothing more than a combination of many ideas. So that means the food that we eat is also a concept of an idea only. Okay, so it's actually difficult. Berkeley also says that pain, real pain, is an idea. So pain is also an idea. What the pain that we feel is not a reality, it's an idea. It's again a figment of our mind, imagination of our mind. And this assertion, so this kind of an argument seems to have antagonized and amused his contemporaries. So this argument of his seems to have antagonized, means people are angry with him, and amused, it's people make fun of him also. His contemporaries means his contradictory, his people who oppose him, etc., and people who were there in his time. So people find it funny and they get angry also with it. And John Arbuthnot, physician to the Queen, engages in some light-hearted teasing when writing to his and Berkeley's friend Jonathan Swift in 1714 that poor philosopher Berkeley has the new idea of health, which was very hard to produce in him. So he's saying, so this Queen's doctor, physician, meaning the Queen Anne's doctor, writes to Jonathan Swift. Now, Jonathan Swift, if you remember, was the author of Gulliver's Travels. He's again an author, a very famous personality. So this guy, the Queen's doctor, writes to his friend about Jonathan Swift about Berkeley. That poor philosopher Berkeley, and sick here means that he's obviously making fun of him, has now the idea of health. So he has a different idea of health. अब idea देखो यहाँ capital से लिखा, means it's a concept which was very hard to produce in him, for he had an idea of a strange fever upon him so strong that it was very hard to destroy it. So he's saying that philosopher Berkeley has a fever in his mind, and it's very difficult to destroy that fever because it is composed of his own ideas. By introducing a contrary one, and you cannot destroy his idea by opposing an opposite idea, so it's really difficult to treat Berkeley. That's what he's saying. And it was and is very hard to think of all phenomena as ideas, and nothing more, even harder to think of our perceiving, feeling, digesting bodies as ideas, and nothing more. So now this is again, we come back to the author, and he says that it's very, very difficult to understand this concept of Berkeley when he talks about just ideas as concepts and nothing else but ideas that we are eating and drinking and everything is an idea. Nevertheless, now that I know something is changing here, Berkeley is clear on this. He clarifies such things as coaches don't exist independently of being perceived because they consist of ideas and perceptions. Without there being a perceiver, they simply can't exist. So he's talking about a coach, meaning a horse cart that he was talking about. So he's saying that this horse cart, अगर कोई perceive ही करने वाला नहीं होगा तो इसको कैसे perceive करेंगे? मतलब अगर कोई person ही नहीं होगा, if there is no person who is thinking about these ideas and making an idea of this cart, if there's nobody to perceive, the coaches may or may not exist as it is. उसके existence का कोई value ही नहीं है. So perception of a person is very important for something to exist. That's what he says. And because God knows and perceives all those things that are at any given time unperceived or unconsidered by the finite mind may have an existence through the infinite mind. Now he comes to say a different thing here, that because God can see and feel and know everything, so some things that are finite minds, means human beings or animals or whatever, some things that humans who can't see and perceive, but still those things exist, even if we have not seen them as human beings, those things exist because God has seen and perceived them. God has created that idea. So since God is omniscient, means all knowing, he has also created some ideas as a concept. And therefore, we as human beings, even though we have not seen, but that perception we can take because those things exist because they are perceived in the God's mind. He's infinite, so he can create infinite ideas. So the finite minds of human beings are not the only source that are needed for the perception or the creation of the ideas. Okay. So, but God's role in Berkeley's thought is not only or most importantly as a backstop for his immaterialism. It is as a giver of laws that other minds must try to follow. Now he's saying that God's role, according to Berkeley, is not just about conceiving of ideas that human minds can't think of. He's also talking about God as a giver of laws that human beings and other minds have to follow. So God has also created some laws. These God-given laws structure the moral, social, and political world, just as others structure the phenomenal world. So he's saying that these God's laws structure the social world around us, physical world around us, just like his other laws structure the phenomena. Phenomena means the universe around us. All right. And I would like to reorient the understanding of Berkeley by bringing the social and political consequences of his religious beliefs to the center and seeing his immaterialism in relation to them. Now, the author is trying to say that he is trying to bring this idea of Berkeley in the social and religious sense of Berkeley, and how he introduces the idea of immaterialism in the social and religious uh, functions also. So this aspect of his philosophy is often neglected by those who wanted to introduce Berkeley as a specimen in the history of philosophy, someone who took to empirism to his limits. So a fuller appreciation of the God in Berkeley philosophy explained why he adopted immaterialism and why he thought his immaterialist philosophy would serve a social purpose, something that isn't immediately obvious from the narrow views of Berkeley's approach, which we find in the history of philosophy. So here the author is saying that I'm going to get the social religious view of Berkeley also, and this has been dismissed by other philosophers who wanted to introduce Berkeley as a specimen, means as an example, as a foolish example rather, and a fuller appreciation of the gods, of the role of God in Berkeley's philosophy, then it will explain how he thought about these other things. So let us quickly explore this. At an early stage in his intellectual development, Berkeley realized that the created universe depends on God, a universe that is known to humans through the relatively dependable series of ideas they experience. So he's saying that universe, the whole universe, not just Earth, but everything around us, is created by God, and human beings' perception depends on the things that have been created by God. So God is then central to Berkeley's thought, providing the context in which the human world elaborate, means the in which, so God is the central thing on which the human world explains. Elaborates means explain or discusses itself. He described the biblical means the Bible creation, as God progressively revealing to other minds some of the eternal contents of her own mind. So here the biblical creation, the creations that were created by God in the Bible, shows how God created things. It's only because God determines that human acts of will have certain consequences in visual, tactile, and other sensory ideas that we have any ideas of our body. So he's saying it is because of God's will that determines the human actions, that human beings will have will, means the determination, or any idea of our bodies, like the visual perception that we can see, the tactile that we can touch, and other senses that we have, is because God wanted us to have this, and the consequence of the world, let alone let alone the dependable consequences. So he is saying that these independent senses that we have are all because God has created it in us, and he wanted us to have these senses. It is for these reasons that Berkeley said that the visual world was a universal language, whereas we are instructed how to regulate our actions. So the visual words means how we see is actually a universal language because everybody is seeing same thing. And we are instructed how to regulate our actions. That the phenomenal world was designed by God. Phenomena means the natural world that was designed by God to demonstrate his grandeur and show us how to behave. So nature was created by God, the universe was created by God to show how human beings had to behave. They have to learn from nature and learn how to behave. Berkeley's purpose in writing was to convince his readers that we have a most almost absolute and immediate dependence on God. So here Berkeley is saying that we are totally dependent on God. Even our willpower, even our perception, what we see, what we hear is all dependent on God, because the whole universe and his creation and what we see is because God wants us to see it this way. All right. So this is a long article. I will share the link of this in the description. I hope you enjoyed it. And now how to sum it up? The first part was Berkeley's immaterialism, and how he talks about that only ideas, nothing except nothing is conceptualized beyond ideas. Material world exists only because of ideas. And then he talks about that this material world can be both infinite by the finite minds, the human minds, and the infinite mind, the God's mind. And then he comes to the God's philosophy, that it is because of God and his creation, his will, that our finite mind see and hears things and we can create our ideas. But the whole idea was created by God. So that's in short the whole summary of the whole thing. So I hope you're enjoying this series. Please comment. I would love to get your comments. Please share with your friends. I would want more subscribers. So, please share, comment, and like, and subscribe, and definitely share with other people who would like to learn something like this. All right. So that's all for this session. Bye bye. Take care.